Down operations in Afghanistan far more quickly than expected.
That's right. It's the first time that the U.S. in fact puts a date on stepping back. What all the countries have to abide by is the commitment they made in Lisbon in 2010. That's all the NATO countries, and they all said we're going to pull out by 2014. But they hadn't given any specifics, and now what you see is a number of countries. What they're thinking is we're losing a lot of money at a time when we badly need it. In this war, we're losing men, and we're not winning. So a number of countries, including the United States, including France, are trying to wind down operations perhaps a little sooner than some had expected. That's why you see Leon Panetta saying by the middle of next year, we're going to end combat, and we're going to ride out the rest of our time just training up the Afghan security forces. France has already winded up combat operations, and it's already training. They've said they're actually going to pull out their combat troops by the end of the next year and then just leave a few hundred men. That will allow them to technically ride out their term in Afghanistan. But what you see is countries essentially trying to downsize their presence in that country.
Now, Leon Panetta's comments came as parts of a report was flashed all over the British media. What exactly is in that report?
Well, this was a highly classified report that was not meant for the media. It was put together by a U.S. military in Bagram Air Base near Kabul, and it's based on what 4,000 detainees had to say across some 27,000 interrogations. So it's quite a hefty report. And the gist of it, well, is that Pakistan continues to manipulate the Taliban in Afghanistan. Pakistan, the report says, is aware of the location of senior Taliban leaders. Pakistan is helping them direct attacks against coalition forces in Afghanistan. There is even widespread collaboration not just between Pakistan and the Taliban, but even between the Afghan security forces themselves and the Taliban. So this is a damning report for what NATO is doing in that country. That's why NATO has tried to distance itself from the report, saying, "Hold on, you should not take this as an assessment of our war effort in that country." However, it is a pretty comprehensive study of what all those detainees have said, and it does continue to paint always the same picture, that Pakistan has a hand in pushing and manipulating the Taliban to continue their attacks.
And that report also says that the Taliban might be ready to take over when NATO forces leave. Might they be able to regain control of the whole country?
There are vast parts of the country that the Taliban will not be able to control. However, there are also significant portions of the country where the Taliban are still present. I mean, militarily, it is clear by now that the Taliban have not been defeated. Yes, in 2001, they quickly had to flee Kabul. There is no longer a Taliban government in place. That doesn't mean that they left the country. Listen to this anecdote from the field. I was covering the pullout of the 1st U.S. Marine Battalion to leave Helmand Province a few months ago in Afghanistan. When they left, there was still fighting going on every day. For several weeks and months before I arrived, had stopped operating in some parts of their area of operation because there were too many Taliban there. The villagers were tired of living in the crossfire, the fighting between the Marines and the Taliban. So the villagers had basically come to the conclusion, and they said as much to the Marines, we prefer to live with just one side. Given that you have not been able to beat the Taliban, we prefer to live with them. So we are asking you to leave. And that was an official request that the villagers put to the U.S. Marine Command several times a week. And that just goes to show there are vast parts of the country where the Taliban have not lost ground. In fact, they seem to be regaining some ground. And that is the essence of their guerrilla tactic. They don't need to control the entire country. They just need to be able to disrupt the work of central government, and they do that very effectively.
Getting back to Pakistan's alleged role in all of this, what would be its interest in helping the Taliban?
Throughout history, Pakistan has always maintained neighboring Afghanistan as a buffer zone, as a proxy that they can control. And they're continuing to do this today. Remember, they have an obsession, which is Indian military influence in the region, so they're trying to counter growing Indian influence in Afghanistan. Also, and importantly, they've always believed that the U.S. was not going about this the right way, going about containing the influence of the Taliban. They've always said you need to sit them down, talk with them, and potentially negotiate a peace deal. The U.S. has not done that. Well, Pakistan, for the moment, has maintained a hand in keeping Afghanistan unstable.
Thank you very much, Cyril Vanier, for that. Now, here in France, François Hollande was flower-bombed during a speech on housing on Wednesday. The woman who attacked him was protesting against the presidential hopeful Socialist Party. His reaction? There are other ways to show that you're unhappy. I remain always open to dialogue.
He's come to sign a charter on public housing when, suddenly, a woman pops up on the stage, and François Hollande is covered in flour. Very quickly, security guards tackle her to the ground. The candidate remains calm. The perpetrator is cuffed and taken away through a packed auditorium. A few minutes later, François Hollande reappears as if nothing has happened.
If I want to meet the French people and sign treaties, if I want to go to conferences where there are a lot of people, I must assume the responsibilities and the risks. There will always be someone who's a little more deranged than someone else. Best to put that person aside, and if you find that person, best to try to keep her from coming near me. But otherwise, listen, these are the risks of the job.
Before him, in 2002, Lionel Jospin was the victim of a squirt of tomato sauce. That same year, President Jacques Chirac was the target of the unstable Maxime Brunerie, who aimed at the president with a rifle. And President Nicolas Sarkozy hasn't been spared either. These physical acts of criticism could become more and more frequent.
In the future, these incidents will be inevitable. And in fact, there will be more of them, for the simple reason that today, I'd say that people are increasingly hypersensitive because of private and professional difficulties.
A month ago, François Hollande had already received death threats, and he isn't the only one. Both Marine Le Pen and Eva Joly were also targeted. And so it looks like the upcoming campaign will include a lot of security.
Efforts are underway to save the passengers of a ferry that sunk off the coast of Papua New Guinea. It was carrying up to 350 people, and so far 219 have been rescued. The MV Rabaul Queen was travelling between the towns of Kimbe and Lae. Australia was asked to help with the rescue operation. To the Philippines, where the military says it's killed 3 most wanted leaders of the al-Qaeda-linked terrorist groups Abu Sayyaf and Jemaah Islamiyah. This in a dawn operation on the southern island of Jolo. One of the militants killed, known as Marwan, carried a $5 million reward from the US government for his killing or capture. Now, the death toll from the cold snap in Central and Eastern Europe has risen past 80, the most lives claimed in Ukraine and Poland. And as heavy snow causes disruption across the region, forecasters say the worst of it isn't over.
Sub-zero temperatures across Europe have caused power outages and slowed traffic. In Valbonne, France, people woke up to another 5 centimeters of snow and icy roads. The conditions have made it difficult for many motorists to control their vehicles.
It's incredible. Of course I'm frightened. It's very slick, and if you go downhill, everyone will just slide.
In other parts of Europe, there have been more serious effects. The temperature plunged to minus 33 in Ukraine. Dozens have died, and hundreds more have been hospitalized.
There are patients with light frostbite, and these will be treated relatively easily. But there are patients with deeper wounds, and they're going to have problems.
Poland's cold spell is expected to last until Friday. Authorities have said there's also a risk of people turning to alternative methods to heat their homes. Overnight, several died and more than 20 suffered carbon monoxide poisoning.
This situation repeats itself every year, but because the cold is not receding, I would like to appeal to everyone to exercise extreme care and attention.
Deaths have also been recorded in Serbia, Germany, and here in Bulgaria. Temperatures hit a record low in 16 towns. Countries across the continent are bracing for the weekend when many forecasters expect the cold snap to peak.
And we end with a different type of ice from a glacier in Chilean Patagonia. More than 5,000 kilos of it was seized by police. Officials say it appears the ice was destined for bars and restaurants in the capital, Santiago. Environmentalists had warned the authorities large chunks of the 1,000-year-old ice were being removed. A reminder now of our top stories. Egypt in mourning after football disaster. A riot